Okay, today we'll start discussion on the secondary storage devices and the organization and management. So far, we have discussed about the main memory and cache memory. Now, when we talk about these memory devices or storage devices, the devices are categorized into three different categories. The first category is called random access storage device or random access memory, which is called RAM. The second kind of storage devices are serial storage devices. And the third category of storage device is what is called direct access storage device or DASD. Now, the category is done on the basis of certain criteria. That is, within a memory, if you are currently accessing a particular location or a particular record, let us call that currently we are accessing a record I. Okay. The next record that is to be accessed is the record J. Then the time taken to move from the ith record to jth record, if we call that a time, say Tij. That is, currently you are accessing record I, and the next record that we want to access is the record J. So to move from the ith record to jth record, the time is Tij. Okay. So if you take the variance of this Tij, then depending upon the variance value, we categorize the storage devices into one of these three categories. So you find that in case of RAM or random access memory, which may be say read-only memory or static memory or say dynamic memory, the variance in Tij, that is sigma Tij, is nearly 0. Okay. That means if currently we are accessing a memory location say 5 and the next memory location that we want to access say 15, then the time remains more or less same. Whether we go to say next location as 15 or next location as 50, the time to move from 5th location to 15th location or 5th location to 50th location, that is more or less same. That means the variance in Tij, that is nearly 0 in case of random access memory. When you come to serial storage device, this variance sigma Tij is very high. Okay. A typical example of this serial storage device is the magnetic tape. So you know that if you are accessing the first record in the magnetic tape, and the next time we want to access a record which is just after the first record, that is the second record. So in that case, Tij will be simply the time taken to move from the first record to the second record. But if we want to access the last record in the magnetic tape, in that case the entire tape has to be passed over the read-write head. Then finally you come to the last record only when it can be accessed. Okay. So you find that depending upon the relative position or the distance from the ith record to jth record, the value of Tij will vary widely. So in case of magnetic tape, the variance in Tij, that is sigma Tij, is very high, and this kind of storage devices are called serial access storage device. And the third category of storage device, that is DASD or direct access storage device, where the variance in Tij lies in between. It is not as low as in case of RAM, where sigma Tij is nearly 0, and also it is not as high as in case of serial storage device. Okay. So typical examples of this DASD, so this mag tape is a serial storage device. And the typical examples of DASD can be say disk, magnetic disk, that is the disk that we use. It can be magnetic drum, it can be floppy drive, or floppy disk, or even it can be your compact disk or optical disk. So all these different storage devices, they come under the category of DASD. Magnetic tape come under the category of serial storage device, whereas the main memory comes under the category of random access storage device. Okay. Now, of these different kinds of devices, again, we can have another categorization. We can call some devices to be character devices, whereas some other devices can be called as block devices. So we can have a character device. We can also have a block device. So the character devices are those where the data can be accessed character by character or byte by byte, or if we wanted to write anything into the device, we can write the data in the form of characters or in the form of bytes. Whereas in case of block devices, a single character or a single byte is not accessible. You have to access the entire block of characters or a particular block of data. So under these character devices, we can say that printer is a character device. Because in case of printer, I can output one character at a time, and the printer will accept the character. But when it comes to, say, magnetic disk or floppy disk or say magnetic drum, these are all block devices. Because from none of these devices, I can access a particular byte or access a particular character. Neither I can write a particular byte or a particular character on the device. What I have to do is, I have to read the entire block containing that character or containing that byte into main memory. Then if I am interested in a particular byte or in a particular character, I have to filter out that particular character or byte from the main memory. I cannot directly access the character or the byte from the secondary storage. Okay. So accordingly, the operating system modules which work on these different kinds of devices, that is also divided into two different sub-modules. One submodule will take care of the character devices. The other submodule will take care of the block devices. Okay. Now, without going to discussion of those modules, let us see that, as we said that today we will discuss about the secondary storage devices, what is the characteristic of the secondary storage devices? So if we simply have a mag tape, that is a serial access storage device, you know that a mag tape is a long tape coated with some magnetic material. So whenever we want to read some data onto this mag tape, the data will be, actually what you do is, when you write the data is written in the form of magnetic orientation. Okay. So it's a long tape. Okay. The tape typically contains 9 tracks. Like this. So there will be 9 tracks on the tape. These tracks are meant for storage of data. Okay. Out of these 9 tracks, 8 tracks will contain 8 bits, that is one complete byte, and the 9th track is usually used to contain the parity bit. So whenever you write a particular byte onto this magnetic tape, you write the 8 data bits on 8 of the tracks, okay, and the 9th track contains the parity information of those 8 bits. So if you set either to use this in odd parity or in the form of even parity, then while extraction of the data from the magnetic tape, you can also check that whether the parity is maintained or not. So if you find that parity is maintained, then you know that what you have read from the magnetic tape, that is correct. If there is any confusion regarding the parity bit, then you know that the data could not be read correctly. You have to read it again. Okay. So this entire magnetic tape passes over a read-write head. So when you say it's a read-write head, it is an array of read-write heads. So as we have 9 different tracks, similarly, to read any data from this magnetic tape, I have to have a read-write head which is actually an array of 9 read-write heads. So each of the tracks passes below one such read-write head. Okay. So when the magnetic tape moves below this array of read-write heads, you can sense what is the bit that is written on that particular location of the track, whether it is 1 or it is 0. Okay. Now this data can be accessed or data can be written onto the magnetic tape when this magnetic tape moves at a particular speed. Okay, so for different devices, the speed is specified. So until and unless this magnetic tape attains that particular speed, you cannot read or you cannot write the data onto it. Okay, so along with this magnetic tape, there has to be a driving mechanism which moves the magnetic tape below this read-write head. And usually, the data is stored on the magnetic tape in the form of records. That is, a number of bytes taken together will form a record. Every byte will be stored laterally, like this. Okay, so this may be a particular byte location where on different tracks I'll have different bits. On the additional track I'll have the parity bit. So the bytes will be stored like this. Okay, a number of bytes taken together forms a record. So whenever I have to access any data from this magnetic tape, I have to access the entire record. Okay. Between two successive records, there is a gap which is called an inter-record gap. Or IRG. Okay. Now the purpose of maintaining this inter-record gap is that, suppose currently I am accessing, let me call this is a ith record, and this is the I plus first record. Okay. So currently, suppose I am reading the ith record, and the next time the record that I want to read is the I plus first record. Then as I mentioned that the data can be read, data can be accessed from this magnetic tape only when the magnetic tape moves at a constant speed, and the speed is specified for a particular drive. Okay. So you find that until and unless the last byte of this record is read, the tape must maintain that constant speed. Okay. So when I am trying to read this ith record, until and unless the last byte of the ith record is read, the tape has to maintain that particular speed. After that, the tape will come to halt. It will stop. Now, because the tape was moving, or the driving mechanism was pulling the tape at a particular speed, and you complete reading this ith record, then the system gives a command to stop magnetic tape. But every driving system will have some inertia. So because of that inertia, the tape cannot be stopped exactly at this location. Okay, the tape will pass below this magnetic, this read-write head, and maybe that when the tape comes to a halt state, the read-write head is positioned somewhere here. Okay. The next time, the next command comes that you read record I plus 1. Okay. Again, right now the tape is in halted state. Okay. Now the tape has to start moving, and before the first record comes below this read-write head, it has to attain that constant speed that is specified. Okay. So until and unless, if we don't maintain such an inter-record gap, you find that if the I plus first record starts immediately after the ith record, in that case, what will happen? After reading the ith record, when the tape comes to a halt state, in that case, the read-write head will be somewhere near the middle of this I plus first record. Next time, if I want to read the I plus first record, I cannot start reading I plus first record immediately, because the first byte of the I plus first record is not available below the read-write head. or I'm not giving any time for the read-write for this step driving mechanism to attain the constant speed before it comes, before this first record of the I plus first record comes below the read-write head. Okay, so a lot of time will be wasted. So that is the reason that we have to maintain some inter-record gap between two successive records in case of a magnetic tape. And the length of this inter-record gap will obviously depend upon what is the speed and what is the acceleration, what is the deceleration of the driving mechanism. Okay. Now, unlike magnetic tape, in case of magnetic disk, or let me first discuss about the floppy disk, because magnetic disk is nothing but an extension of the floppy disk. You know that a floppy disk is nothing but a circular disk. Okay, a circular plate. Again, this plate is made up of some synthetic material and coated with the magnetic materials. Okay. On this plate, the data is stored in concentric circles. So there will be a number of concentric circles on this disk which will contain the data. And each of these circles is called a track. So these are different tracks which contains the data. Okay. These tracks are divided into a number of sectors. Okay. So this is a particular sector. So whenever I have to access any data from the floppy drive, or I have to write any data onto this floppy drive, either I have to read the entire sector or I have to write the entire sector onto the disk. From the disk, I cannot access any particular byte. Okay. So to access a particular sector, I must identify that which sector I am interested in. And not only that, I also have to identify that which track I am interested in. So it is the track number and the sector number taken together that gives an unique identification of a particular record, or in this case, let us call it a particular block on the disk, on the floppy disk, which can be accessed either for reading purpose or for writing purpose. Okay. So every data unit on the magnetic tape, on the magnetic disk or floppy disk, will have a two-component address. The two-component address consists of a track number and a sector number. Okay. Now this is the situation of a kind of disk which is called a single-sided disk. I can also have another kind of disk which is called a double-sided disk, in which case the data will be stored on both sides of the disk. Okay. In case of single-sided disk, the data can be stored only on one side of the disk. You cannot store the data on the other side of the disk. Okay. Then accordingly, depending upon the number of surfaces on which the data can be stored, I have to have so many read-write heads. So if it is a single-sided disk, a single read-write head will be sufficient. If it is a double-sided disk, I have to have two read-write heads. Okay. And the read-write heads are arranged like this. So this is a read-write head which moves over the disk, and it moves in the radial direction. Okay. Now when it goes onto the disk, the gap between the read-write head and the disk is few microns. If I have a double-sided disk, then I have to have two such read-write heads. So this head will access this particular surface on the disk, this head will access the other side of the disk. And they are fixed mechanically and when you move this read-write head, both the read-write heads will move simultaneously. Okay. So in case of a double-sided disk, only track number and sector number is not sufficient. I have to have another component of the address, which is the head number. Okay. So maybe this is head number 0, this is head number 1. So if you access a particular block on the top surface of the disk, then I have to have head number as 0, then some track number and some sector number. Okay. So along with this, I also have to have head number for a double-sided disk. So this entire address in the form of triplet is valid for a double-sided disk, whereas for a single-sided disk, only track number and sector number is sufficient. Okay. So this is the situation for a floppy disk. Now, what is the case for a magnetic disk or hard disk that we have in the computer system? A hard disk is nothing but a number of such disks, single disks, which are stacked together. Okay? So in case of a hard disk, we have a number of such plates which are stacked together and fixed on a spindle. Like this. Okay. On each of these disks, we have a number of concentric circular tracks. Maybe the tracks are present on both the sides of every such disk, or they may be present on one side of the disk. So like this. Okay. And as in case of my floppy disk, these tracks are also divided into number of sectors. Okay. So like this. And again here, the number of read-write heads that you need depends upon how many surfaces, total number of surfaces on this stack which contains data. So if each of these disks are single-sided disks, then I need only 3 read-write heads. Okay? If each of these disks is double-sided disk, then I need 6 read-write heads. Okay? Now, as before, in this case, for accessing a particular block on the disk, on the hard disk, I have to have 3-component address. I have to have head number, because the moment I say that what is the head number, that uniquely identifies the surface on one of these disks which I am interested in. Okay. So if I say head number 0, then the top surface of the top disk is accessed. If I give the head number 2, then the top surface of the second disk will be accessed. If I give the head number 0, then bottom surface of the top disk will be accessed. Head number 1, then bottom surface of the topmost disk will be accessed. So moment I say head number, I uniquely identify the particular surface in which I am interested. So once this head number is given, next what I am interested in is the track number. Okay. Now the disks and the tracks are so aligned that the 0th track of every disk is allocated at the same location, is present at the same location. Okay. So the same track on every disk taken together is called a cylinder, because this simply forms a cylindrical surface. So 0th track of the first disk may be top surface, 0th track of the first disk of the bottom surface, 0th tracks of the second disk, 0th tracks of the third disk. All these 0th tracks form a single cylinder. Similarly, all the first tracks, they also form another single cylinder. Okay. So instead of telling the track number, I can also specify this as a cylinder number. Okay. So for addressing a particular block, I have to have head number, I have to have cylinder number, so find that this head number and the cylinder number, they taken together identifies a particular track on one of the disks. Okay. So once I have identified a particular track, then the next what I'd like to know is what is the sector number. So the third component in the address will be the sector number. Okay. So for accessing any block from the disk, I have to provide this three component address: head number, cylinder number, and track number, sector number, and all these three taken together is what is called a block number on the disk. Okay. And whenever I want to access anything from the disk, I have to access block by block, whether it is for reading purpose or for writing purpose. Okay. Then we had mentioned that our memory is a 3-level memory hierarchy. At the topmost level, we have the CPU. The CPU will try, when the CPU wants to access any data or any instruction, the CPU first checks the cache memory. If the data or the instruction that is requested is not available in the cache memory, then you have to search for it in the main memory. If it is not available in the main memory also, then you have to go to the secondary storage. Check for it in the secondary storage. And that is the one that we have said in case of our demand paging or the virtual memory management system. Okay. So we assume that the secondary storage is large enough to contain the logical address space of all the jobs in the system. Okay. And the hierarchy will be like this. The CPU first checks in the cache memory. If there is a cache miss, then it has to go to main memory. If there is a main memory miss, then you have to check for it in the secondary storage. And as I said that in the main memory and cache memory, I can access byte by byte. Every individual location in the memory can be accessed in case of cache memory or in case of main memory. But when it goes to the secondary storage, I cannot access a particular byte. I have to access the entire block, and the block address has to be a 3-component address like this. Okay. Now the reason for breaking the entire memory system, the storage system, into a 3-level hierarchy like this is only to increase the system throughput or improve the performance of the system. Because the cache memory is the fastest memory among all these things. Then comes the main memory, and the slowest memory is the secondary storage. Okay. Again, in the secondary storage, I can have a serial access storage device like magnetic tape. I can also have a direct access storage device like the disk or disk drive. Okay. The main purpose of breaking the entire memory system into a 3-level hierarchy like this is to improve the system performance. Okay. Now, even in this case, when I have to access the data from the secondary storage, when it is neither available in the cache memory nor in the main memory, if I have to access anything from the secondary storage, the process becomes very slow. Because this is the slowest device in the storage hierarchy. To reduce even the frequency of access of this secondary storage, what the system maintains is what is called a buffer cache. Okay, so I'll put it as a buffer cache. Now this buffer cache is not same as this cache memory. This buffer cache is a part of main memory which contains different blocks of data from the secondary storage. Okay. So logically I can put it like this. I have this main memory. A part of the main memory is called a buffer cache. And usually, this buffer cache is maintained in the system area of the main memory. That is, we have said that when you partition the main memory into a number of different partitions, then one or more of the partitions is always allocated to the operating system. Okay, that is the system area. And the buffer cache is usually maintained in the system area so that this cannot be disturbed by any of the user process. The buffer cache is managed by the operating system only. Okay, and here we have the secondary storage. So whenever we have to read anything from the secondary storage, the first level of communication takes place between the buffer cache and the secondary storage. So this is a DASD or direct access storage device. So the first level communication takes place between the buffer cache and the DASD. Then from the buffer cache, the data goes to the user location in the main memory or user area of the main memory. Okay. Now, how this buffer cache is maintained? The buffer cache is actually an array or a pool of buffer areas. Each of the buffers contains mainly two parts. One is the data area and other one is the header area. Okay. So I have two components, two areas in the buffer. One is the header, buffer header, and other one is the data area. The data area of the buffer contains the data from a block of DASD. As I said that whenever I have to access anything from the DASD, I have to access it in the form of block. Okay. So this data area will contain one block of the DASD. So if I have, say, 50 buffers in a user area. And that takes obviously less amount of time because buffer cache is also maintained in the main memory. But in case the data is not available in the buffer cache, then you have no other way than to go to the secondary storage, access that particular block, and read that block into one of these buffer cache, provided the buffer cache is free. Okay? If the buffer cache is not free, then I have to victimize one of the buffer cache. If none of the buffer caches are free, that means that every buffer cache contains some block of the secondary storage. Okay? So out of that, I have to push out one of the blocks from one of the buffer cache to make that buffer cache free to contain this new block from the secondary storage. Okay? So again there, the type of replacement algorithm that is used is the least recently used replacement algorithm that we have seen in case of demand paget memory management. Okay. So what I was saying, that every buffer has two different areas. One is the header area, other one is the data area. The data area will contain a particular block of the DSD storage device. So naturally, the size of the data area has to be at least as large as the block size on the secondary storage. Okay, so if every block size is 512 bytes, then the data area must be at least 512 bytes. It cannot be less than that. This header area